All right, hello everybody. This is the first edition of OLLO Chat. My name is Kulic. I'm the co-founder of OLLO, and today at the very first OLLO edition, OLLO Chat edition, we have actually our very first endorser, Alma from Netherlands. Hello, Anne.
Hello. Yeah, the pronunciation is a little bit different because, well, it's always the same. It's Anne.
It's Anne.
Anne Alma. Yeah.
Alma. Anne Alma. It's kind of difficult for me to say, but thanks for the correction. I would like to, hear from you what was the first impression. The first feeling when you opened the box and touched the headphones, the pillow. What was there anything remarkable? Maybe something that is still in your head somehow.
Yeah, I was thinking when I unpacked the headphone, quite heavy.
Okay.
But okay, it is what do you call it? Sturdy. It's used. It can be used for quite a rough endurance. It won't break down easily. That's the feeling I got when I packed it out of the box.
Yeah.
And then I was searching on the cans.
Okay.
For the left and the right, but.
Oh yeah.
That depends on the cable.
Yeah, the left and the right is just indicated on the cable, not on the can itself. Yeah.
No. So it fit both ways.
Yeah. What were your expectations of the pillow? Once you got it, what were your first thoughts?
Well, the first time I tested it, I just was sitting on it, and that was not quite a good idea. The best is indeed to put it on the back and lean to it with your back.
Yeah.
I bought another chair for it, a different chair that could fit in nicely. Yeah.
Okay.
And the first time I used it, you have to get used to it because, the same as with in-ear monitoring and all those kind of things, it's easy to do too much.
How do you think that the perception of sound is changed if you're using the pillow? Do you actually hear better the low frequencies, or is this something that happens inside your brain, just joining the vibration and translating them into sound? What's your experience with that?
No, that happens more in the brain. As I said, you have to get used to it. You have to feel it, but don't exaggerate. And that's what I did at the first, and then you get distracted. But when you turn down the volume of the pillow, just that you feel a little.
Yeah.
The feeling starts first, and later on you're getting you can pull more into the sound.
Yeah.
It's not, it's like being in a live concert.
Yeah. Kind of adds this third dimension and the tactile dimension to the sound.
Yeah.
I really have to say that I went through your Clip-It profile, probably through almost all of your songs there. I've been listening to them here in the office for a day, and honestly, I can hear you're obviously very talented and skilled when it comes to mixing vocals. I really like your vocals, just the extremely clear and all the reverbs and things are really natural, really coming through, but not being distractful. So that's the part that I really liked in your productions. How do you approach mixing vocals?
If I start mixing, the first thing I'll do is group everything, the drums, the instruments, and so on, and I mix the vocals as being last in the session because the things you will mix last will be translated louder in the mix than the things you start treating first.
Okay.
So, in my opinion, and it works for me, and Yeah, that's and then what I do is first I solo everything,
Okay.
uh, get out the artifacts that I don't want, and sometimes I delete whole tracks because they disturb or whatever, and then I'll just give it what I think is needed for the track. Sometimes it's more than the client asks, but sometimes it's less, and we mostly agree. That's
Okay.
what I
I
yeah.
mean, and what about? I mean, how do you actually start mixing? You mentioned that you talk to your clients, right? So, do you have like some standard questions that you ask them? Is there something that you really want to know before you go and dive into mixing, or do you really want to be a free bird? So just mix whatever you think is good, and then later on check that with the client.
No, that depends. If it's a band or whatever, they have a certain sound.
Okay.
I try to get to the live sound. And if it's a client I didn't do any work before, I just want to dive into the deep and see what I think should be done, and then await the reaction of the client.
Okay. How much time do you actually spend on this very first mix, on the first interaction? Do you do it like, for example, you might know Tom Elmhurst, which is a producer for Adele, a very
Mm,
famous one, and he's famous for the trick that he does. He only spends about 20 minutes on mixing. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
He's got his assistants that just put the tracks in and everything kind of flattens out. And then he
yeah,
spends 20 minutes on the first version, which is basically 85% ready.
yeah.
So he doesn't want to get disturbed and dragged into the mix until it's never finished. All right. So
No,
I want to know what's your approach, man. How do you avoid this? Like, oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then revision after revision after revision, and never coming to an end. I mean, this is something that basically all mixing engineers and producers and so on experience at some point in their career, right? So I want to know,
no.
how did you, throughout the years when you turned from from the beginner to mid-level now to professional, how did you learn to stop at some point and say, okay, this is the first version, this is the amount of time and attention I'm going to give it right now, and I'm going to send it out and seek for feedback? How do you work on that?
The first thing that I do, of course, is gain staging of all the channels and that kind of things. If that is finished, you are right. Yeah, an hour max mixing, an hour max, because then you get too much into detail. Nobody would hear,
Yeah.
only you hear, and that's the point where I stop. That is with songs from clients. If I have a song from myself, it won't leave the studio because I'm always picking on it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
yeah.
How did you actually train your ears? I mean, how do you know what sounds good and what's not? I mean, there's obviously, you had a long career, right? So, I mean, how did you get into the business? How did you train your ears, and how important do you think that the time is? I mean, meaning how much time you are in the business, how many songs went through your ears, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Maybe the patience side of this. I mean, if I start right now doing what you do, and I don't know, spend $1 million on gear, I will not be able to produce anything. So I need some traction. I need something to learn, right? I
Yeah.
want to know what's your experience. I mean, how did you actually start out? What were your first gigs, and all the way to now as a professional mixer?
The first things I did was what do you call it? A guy and a guitar, um, troubadours.
Okay.
Just a guy and a guitar singing, and that was one of the first gigs. Uh, that was all right, because the same day we got a appointment with a band who wanted to do meet the sound, the live enforcement, and that's when you learn the most, because you learn to work very fast and to ignore the the less important details.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's something you have to learn by time.
Yeah, I mean, and how do your experience from the live mixing affect you now in when you're in basically mixing in the box? You know, I mean,
The
it's
speed.
these are two different worlds, kind of, but at the same time, there's a lot of parallels going on. So I want to know if it's smart for a producer, a young producer, to like start doing live shows as well, or is it maybe better to just focus on mixing in the box?
No, I think it's good to do live shows as well because you learn to work fast. You learn to grab the right buttons for EQing and so on, and you learn about levels very fast.
Yeah, true,
Uh,
absolutely.
um, it happens quite a lot when I do live bands that I do the sound check, everything separate,
Mm.
and then I'll ask the band to do a song just for a total check.
Hmm.
Most times I just can step away from the mixer because all levels are gained pretty properly.
Okay. You obviously have a sense of what's coming up next. I mean, there are certainly trends going on, right? So I mean, the
Mhm.
trends in the '90s were to move to DAWs, right? Then in
Yeah.
early 2000, everybody was in DAW, right? So
Uh,
right now it's 100%. You know, there's a very few records being made outside of the DAW. I mean, it's almost impossible actually to make them anymore. So the, 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 this music landscape and the production landscape is kind of changing, right? So what
mhm.
I've noticed is that it also affects consumers, right? I mean, we are now listening to Spotify and iTunes and so on. I mean, there was the MP3 war for a few years where everybody was listening to like really shitty and crappy sound for no
Very
reason.
loud.
And very loud and so on, loudness war as well. Congratulations to Spotify, they just dropped it to minus 14. So
Yes,
that's,
the normal the industrial standard for music
yeah. So, I mean,
for radio. Oh,
so I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, we are based on headphones, and I want to hear from your perspective. Do you think that the headphones have a future, or are actually headphones now? Meaning, is it time to start really focusing on playback on headphones, since majority of people are actually consuming music on headphones, right? And then on the other side, are headphones capable of reproducing or the play of playback on such a level that you can actually make a pro mix on it? So that's kind of the question I want to ask.
yeah, it's always um, yeah, difficult. As you are right, most youngsters all have plugs already in the ears by birth almost, and all connected to their iPhone or whatever phone. So the kind of listening changes. Um, but the other thing is the headphones which you make uh, is of a complete different level. To mix on headphones for mixing on headphones, you need headphones that go all the way, all the spectrum, and in a decent sound level. Most of the headphones I used and I know were all hyped, or in the lows, or in the highs, or a combination of both. And that way the mids, which are the most important part because of the vocals, and well, there's all the mix happening. Also, the stereo field and so on is all in the mids. Um, yeah, most of the other headphones it disappears because of the hyping of the other frequencies, and yeah, that's what struck me with the hollows. Uh, they stay clean, and even if you play soft, after you have to burn them in, by the way. But if they're burned in, they stay consistent. If it's soft or if it's loud, it doesn't matter. It's all always the same um, spectrum you're listening to. It's not. I've had headphones when you turn them up. The highs get louder or the lows get louder, and that's not the thing with the OLLOs. So I did some mixes on these headphones, and they were okay. They were good enough. Yeah.
I want to know your experience. Like, when did you first start mixing with headphones, or is this your first actual like professional try? And what is the main advantage of going with traditional monitoring, or I mean, on the flip side, what is the main advantage of going with the headphones? Can you compare these two worlds maybe quickly?
If you want to mix on monitors in a room, you have to have a treated room. For example, my studio, there is not a 90-degree angle. All the walls are tilted. All the walls are covered with a special kind of carpet and so on to reduce the reflections. And then it's important how the monitors are placed, because, well, if you place them to a corner, it always will happen. You call it a standing wave?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. There always will be a standing wave when you don't come too close to whatever corner. If it's a square or if it's 70 degrees or 30 degrees, it doesn't matter. So,
yeah.
And the distance between the monitors and your ears is very important. And yeah, that's a lot of figuring out and so on. That's with monitors. When they are placed right, it's no problem. You can do whatever you want. The thing with headphones is, you don't need a treated room. If you have a project on your laptop and you have to go to a hotel or whatever, or on a travel, or you can mix in a plane if you want, or in a hotel room, or it doesn't matter. The acoustics are all the same because you're wearing headphones.
Yeah. What about the? There's been a lot of debate going on with mixing on headphones, right? But it's quite hot debate sometimes, especially when it comes to mixing reverbs and delays and stereo panning, right? So, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to really comprehend what is kind of better. For example, if you mix a phantom center, right? You have two speakers, right? And the phantom center is there. If you turn 100% to the left, your sound in the mixing, it's not going to be 100% to the left. It's going to be where your speaker is, right? So there's kind of a little less room to go when it comes to stereo wideness. There is more on headphones, but at the same time, that can produce a side effect, right? So, for example, a delay, a ping pong delay, or something like that, on headphones will sound a lot bigger than it actually will sound then on speakers. So sometimes maybe it's really up to a mixer to decide either the mix is going to be most likely played back on headphones, or will it most likely be played in a hi-fi situation, or maybe, I don't know, in a supermarket or somewhere like that. So what's your comment on that, actually?
I always check the mix afterwards when I use headphones or whatever. So there is one point you didn't mention. Actually, a lot of listening is mono. True. You mentioned the supermarket. The supermarket is mostly mono. The discos is mostly mono. Only the bigger venues like big dancey fans and that kind of things are stereo. But you always have to be sure that when you make a mix, it has to be good in mono and it has to be good in stereo. And for that, I don't think there is a lot of difference in the mixing on headphones or on monitors, because you always have to check back on mono if it's still okay.
Yeah.
And
sure.
you're right. The panning on the headphones is 100% and is 100%, and in the headphone or in the monitors, well, yeah, what would it be? 30 degrees, something.
Yeah.
That's the normal angle. But yeah.
Mhm.
Now the biggest part is make sure a mix sounds good in mono, and well, then add the stereo effects
Yeah. Absolutely.
and check.
All right. I think we're coming to an end of this first edition of OLLO Show, OLLO Chat Show, as we call it. As mentioned, we're chatting with Alma. I hope I pronounced this right this time.
Yes, yes, very good.